The German Shepherd hit the hospital floor at a dead sprint, claws scraping linoleum, 70 pounds of military-trained muscle, moving like a missile through the emergency department of Riverside General in Carson Falls, Washington. Security guards shouted, nurses scattered. The dog blew past two armed police officers, ignored the blood trails from Trauma Bay 3, and locked onto a woman in pale blue scrubs standing alone near the supply closet. Sarah Brennan was restocking gauze when the K9 sat perfectly still 6 inches from her feet and executed a recognition signal she hadn't seen in 7 years. The entire ER went dead silent. Then the dog's handler appeared, staring at Sarah like he'd just seen a ghost crawl out of a grave. Before we dive into Sarah's story, I want to invite you to stay with me until the very end. If this story moves you, please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Sarah Brennan had been invisible for 3 years. Not literally, of course. She showed up for every shift at Riverside General. She wore the same scrubs as everyone else. She answered pages. She documented wounds. She followed protocols. But to the people around her, she barely existed. Dr. Marcus Reeves treated her like furniture. Senior nurses whispered about her behind the medication carts. The younger staff called her the robot because she never smiled, never joked, never shared stories about her weekend. She was 32 years old, blonde hair always pulled tight in a bun, no jewelry, no makeup, no photographs taped inside her locker. When people asked about her background, she said she'd worked at a clinic in Idaho before moving west. Nobody pushed, nobody cared. That was exactly how Sarah needed it. The Thursday night shift started like every other. Sarah clocked in at 10:47 p.m., changed into fresh scrubs in the locker room, while two nurses discussed their dating lives 3 feet away without acknowledging her presence, and walked onto the floor as the day crew filtered out. Riverside General sat on the east side of Carson Falls, a mid-sized city pressed between mountains and timber country. The ER saw the usual rotation: logging accidents, bar fights, overdoses, chest pain, strokes. 12 beds, 4 doctors, 20 nurses across 3 shifts. A place where people came when they were broken and left when they were stable enough to go home. Sarah liked the night shift. Fewer people, less conversation, more time to think. She was restocking the supply closet near Trauma Bay 2 when she heard the commotion. Voices rose near the ambulance bay. Heavy boots on tile. Someone shouted about keeping the doors clear. Sarah stepped into the hallway and saw police officers clustered near the entrance, 2 of them holding the double doors open while a third man appeared with a German Shepherd straining against a tactical leash. The dog was working. Sarah could tell by the way its ears were pinned forward, body tight, nose scanning the air. She'd seen that posture before. Nurse practitioner Linda Cho walked past, clipboard under one arm. "What's going on?" One of the officers glanced at her. K9 unit. They were doing a sweep downtown after a suspicious package call. Dogs trained for explosives and narcotics. Handler said the dog picked up something near the hospital, started pulling toward the building. Linda frowned. "We don't have explosives here." "That's what we're checking." The handler released some tension on the leash. The dog surged forward, moving through the ER waiting room in controlled sweeps, nose low. Patients watched nervously. A toddler started crying. Sarah turned back toward the supply closet. Whatever this was, it wasn't her problem. She had inventory to finish, medication logs to review, a chest pain in Bay 7 that needed another EKG in 30 minutes. She was pulling a box of 4x4 gauze off the shelf when she heard the claws. Fast, close. She turned just as the German Shepherd rounded the corner and stopped 3 feet in front of her. The dog sat, perfectly still. Then it lifted one paw and held it in the air. Sarah's stomach dropped. That was a recognition signal, not an alert for explosives, not a signal for narcotics, a recognition signal for a person. The handler appeared seconds later, breathing hard, eyes widening when he saw the dog sitting in front of Sarah. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. Sarah didn't move. The handler stared at her face like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. He was mid-30s, military buzz cut, name patch that read Morrison. His hand drifted toward the radio on his chest. "Ma'am, I need you to stay exactly where you are." Linda appeared behind him. "What's going on?" Morrison didn't look away from Sarah. "This dog is trained for high-value target recognition. He just ID'd her." ID'd her for what? I don't know yet. More officers arrived. Sarah felt the walls closing in. She kept her hands visible, her breathing even, her face calm. The same mask she'd worn for 3 years. Dr. Reeves pushed through the crowd, irritation written across his face. He was 49, graying at the temples, the kind of doctor who thought his MD made him the smartest person in every room. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. "We have patients waiting." Morrison gestured toward Sarah. "Sir, we need to secure this individual." "Secure her? That's Sarah Brennan. She's a nurse." The dog recognized her from military operations. Reeves laughed. "That's ridiculous. Sarah's been here for 3 years. She's never even mentioned the military." "Has she mentioned anything?" Morrison asked. Reeves opened his mouth, closed it. Because the truth was, nobody knew anything about Sarah Brennan. Morrison pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, waited. His expression shifted. "We need to move her to a secure area," he said quietly. Linda stepped forward. "You can't just detain our staff without cause." "I have cause. This dog doesn't make mistakes." Security arrived. Sarah let them guide her toward an empty consultation room off the main hallway. The dog followed, still calm, still watching her. She sat in a plastic chair while Morrison made calls outside, his voice low and urgent. Through the door, she could hear the ER continuing around her, monitors beeping, radios crackling, someone shouting for an X-ray. She closed her eyes. 7 years. She'd made it 7 years. Morrison came back 20 minutes later. His face was unreadable. "Sarah Brennan," he said slowly. "That's not your real name, is it?" She didn't answer. "The dog's name is Ranger. He was deployed overseas with a special operations unit between 2015 and 2018. He's trained to recognize specific individuals connected to classified missions." Sarah kept her expression flat. Morrison leaned against the wall. "I ran your face through our database. Nothing came up. But Ranger doesn't make mistakes. So either you're someone who got scrubbed from the system, or you're someone who was never supposed to exist in the first place." "I'm a nurse," Sarah said quietly. "Maybe now. But that dog knows you from somewhere else." Before she could respond, the hospital's overhead intercom crackled to life. Code Silver, active shooter, ambulance bay." Morrison's head snapped up. He grabbed his radio as gunfire erupted somewhere close, too close. The lights flickered. Sarah stood slowly, her body already shifting into a different mode, muscle memory overriding 3 years of forced stillness. Morrison turned toward the door. "Stay here." "No." He looked back at her. Sarah's voice was different now, harder. "You're about to walk into a situation you're not trained for. If you want to live through the next 10 minutes, you'll let me help." "You're a nurse." "I'm a lot of things." Another burst of gunfire. Screaming. Morrison hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. Then he stepped aside. Sarah moved past him into the hallway. The ER had descended into chaos. Patients were on the floor, nurses crouched behind desks, doctors yelling conflicting orders. The lights were still flickering. Near the ambulance bay, Sarah could see 2 men in tactical gear advancing through the waiting room, rifles raised. They weren't police. She recognized the movement patterns. Methodical, professional, military contractors. This wasn't random. Sarah grabbed a nurse by the arm. "How many entrances are unsecured?" The woman stared at her, terrified. "How many?" Sarah repeated. 3. The ambulance bay, the staff entrance, and the loading dock. Sarah processed that in half a second. 3 entry points, 2 shooters visible, probably more outside. They were trying to lock down the building. She turned to Morrison. "Get everyone into the central hallway, away from windows, now." "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who's done this before." A bullet shattered the glass partition near Trauma Bay 4. Morrison flinched. Sarah didn't. She moved toward the nurse's station, grabbed the phone, and dialed 911. "This is Riverside General. We have armed hostiles inside the building. At least 2 shooters, possibly more. They're using military-grade weapons. This is not a random attack. Repeat, this is not random. Send SWAT and tell them to expect organized resistance." She hung up before dispatch could respond. Dr. Reeves appeared, crouched behind a medication cart. "What are you doing?" "Keeping people alive. You can't just get everyone into the interior rooms, lock the doors, stay away from exterior walls." "I'm the senior physician here." Sarah turned and looked at him. really looked at him. Her eyes were different now, cold, flat, the kind of eyes that had seen things Reeves couldn't imagine. He shut up. She turned to Morrison. How many rounds do you have? 2 magazines, 40 rounds total. Not enough. There are medical crash carts in every trauma bay, top drawer right side. We keep sedatives there, ketamine, propofol, midazolam. If we can get close enough, we can drop them without firing a shot. Morrison stared at her. You want to sedate armed gunmen? You have a better idea? Another spray of gunfire, this time closer. Sarah heard glass breaking in the hallway near the CT scanner. She moved quickly, staying low, reaching Trauma Bay 2 and pulling open the crash cart. Her hands found the medication drawer automatically. She grabbed 3 vials of ketamine and 2 syringes, loading them with practiced speed. Linda appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. Sarah, what are you doing? Something I hoped I'd never do again. I don't understand. Sarah looked at her. For a moment, something human flickered across her face. You don't need to. She capped the syringes, tucked them into her scrub pocket, and moved back into the hallway. The shooters were advancing. One of them fired a burst into the ceiling, sending acoustic tiles raining down. Patients screamed. Sarah stayed in the shadows, moving parallel to the gunman, her steps silent despite the chaos. Morrison followed, weapon drawn, but clearly out of his depth. The first shooter reached the nurse's station. He was scanning the room, rifle sweeping in controlled arcs. Professional, trained, expensive. Sarah waited until he turned his back. Then she moved, fast. She closed the distance in 4 steps, yanked the cap off one syringe with her teeth, and drove the needle into the side of his neck, depressing the plunger in one smooth motion. The man spun, tried to bring the rifle around, but the ketamine hit his system like a truck. His knees buckled. Sarah caught the rifle as he fell, twisted it out of his grip, and set it on the ground. Morrison stared at her. Who the hell are you? The second shooter appeared around the corner, saw his partner on the ground, and raised his weapon towards Sarah. She was already moving. She grabbed a rolling IV stand and hurled it down the hallway. The shooter fired, bullets sparking off the metal pole. Sarah used the distraction to close the gap, sliding low like she was stealing second base. She came up inside his reach, knocked the rifle barrel up toward the ceiling, and drove her knee into his groin. He doubled over. She brought her elbow down on the back of his neck. He hit the floor hard. She had the second syringe out and into his shoulder before he could recover. 10 seconds later, he was unconscious. Sarah stood slowly, breathing hard, her hands shaking just slightly. The ER was silent except for the distant wail of approaching sirens. Dr. Reeves emerged from behind the medication cart, staring at her like she'd just walked through a wall. What? He started. Later, Sarah said. But she knew there wouldn't be a later because the attack wasn't over. Her radio, the one she'd clipped to her scrubs years ago and never used, crackled to life in her pocket. A voice she hadn't heard in 7 years came through, distorted and cold. Hello, Lieutenant. Sarah's blood turned to ice. We know you're alive. We know where you are. And now we're going to finish what we started. The line went dead. Morrison was staring at her. Lieutenant? Sarah didn't answer. She was already calculating exits, counting personnel, running threat assessments in her head. Because whoever had just spoken wasn't part of the assault team on the ground. They were command. And if command knew she was here, then this wasn't just an attack. It was an execution. The hospital's backup generator kicked on, bathing the ER in harsh emergency lighting. Through the windows, Sarah could see more vehicles pulling into the parking lot, not police cars, black SUVs, unmarked. Morrison saw them too. What is this? Sarah turned toward him, her face grim. This is the part where everyone who knows I exist becomes a liability. She grabbed the rifle from the floor, checked the chamber, and moved toward the staff entrance. Where are you going? Morrison called. To make sure you all survive the night. We need to evacuate. They'll kill everyone in the building before they let me walk out of here. Why? Sarah paused at the door, her hand on the frame. Because 7 years ago, my entire unit was declared dead after we discovered something we weren't supposed to find. The military buried us, erased us, and if they find out I survived, they'll do whatever it takes to make sure the truth stays buried. She pushed through the door into the night. Behind her, Morrison stood frozen in the emergency lighting, finally understanding. The quiet nurse they'd all ignored. The woman nobody knew. She wasn't running away. She was hunting. And somewhere in the darkness outside Riverside General, the people who'd tried to erase her were about to learn exactly what kind of soldier they'd failed to kill. The night air hit her face like cold water. Sarah moved along the exterior wall of Riverside General, rifle pressed against her shoulder, eyes scanning the parking lot. The black SUVs had stopped near the ambulance bay, doors still closed, engines running, waiting. She counted 4 vehicles, standard tactical formation. That meant at least 12 operatives, possibly 16 if they were running full teams. The radio in her pocket crackled again. "Lieutenant Brennan, or should I call you Sarah? That's the name you've been hiding behind, isn't it?" She didn't respond. Responding would give them a location if they were running directional scanners. "You made a mistake tonight. You should have stayed invisible. Should have kept playing nurse." Sarah reached the corner of the building and paused, checking angles. The loading dock was 50 yards east, partially hidden by a delivery truck. If she could reach it, she'd have access to the basement level and the old maintenance tunnels that connected to the parking structure. "We're not here to negotiate," the voice continued. "We're here to clean up a loose end, but we're professionals. Surrender now, and the hospital staff lives. Keep running, and we burn the whole building down with everyone inside." Sarah's jaw tightened. They weren't bluffing. These weren't cops or FBI. This was private military. Contractors paid to disappear problems that governments couldn't officially touch. She needed to move them away from the hospital, draw them out, create enough chaos that local law enforcement would have no choice but to respond with overwhelming force. She keyed the radio, voice low. "You want me? Come get me." Then she fired 3 rounds into the engine block of the nearest SUV. The parking lot erupted. Doors flew open. Men in tactical gear poured out, weapons raised, moving in coordinated formations that would have made any SWAT team jealous. Sarah was already sprinting toward the loading dock, keeping low, using parked cars as cover. Gunfire chased her. Bullets sparked off concrete, shattered car windows, punched through metal. She reached the loading dock and vaulted onto the platform, rolling behind a stack of cardboard boxes as rounds tore through the air where she'd been standing. Inside the loading area, she found what she was looking for: the service elevator and the access door to the maintenance level. She yanked the door open and descended into the basement, her footsteps echoing off bare concrete. The tunnels beneath Riverside General were older than the current building, remnants of a hospital expansion from the 1970s that had been abandoned halfway through construction. Most staff didn't even know they existed. Sarah had found them during her first month, the same way she'd mapped every exit, counted every camera, memorized every shift rotation. Because even after 7 years, she'd never stopped preparing for the moment someone found her. She moved through this darkness using muscle memory, one hand trailing along the damp wall, rifle ready. Behind her, she heard boots on stairs. They were following. Good. The farther she drew them from the ER, the safer the civilians stayed. The tunnel forked. Sarah went left, toward the parking structure. 20 yards ahead, she found the maintenance access ladder that led up to the second level of the parking garage. She climbed quickly, pushed open the hatch, and emerged between 2 rows of cars. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real cops now, responding to the 911 call. That would complicate things for the contractors. They'd have to work faster, which meant sloppier. Sarah moved between vehicles, staying low. She needed higher ground, needed to see the full tactical picture. She reached the stairwell and climbed to the 3rd level. From there, she could see the entire front of the hospital. The black SUVs were still in position. More operatives were spreading out, setting up a perimeter. They were locking down every exit. Her radio crackled again. Different voice this time, younger, more aggressive. "We have eyes on the staff entrance. 4 civilians trying to evacuate. Should we engage?" "Negative," the original voice replied. "Let them go. We only need 1 target." Sarah exhaled slowly. They were keeping their word about the staff. That was something. Not much, but something. She watched the 4 people, 2 nurses and 2 doctors, run across the parking lot toward the street. They disappeared into the darkness beyond the hospital grounds. "Lieutenant Brennan," the voice said, "we know you can hear us. We know you're watching. So let's talk about what happens next." Sarah stayed silent. "Your file is very impressive. Marine Corps, Force Reconnaissance, transferred to a joint task force in 2015. attached to a black ops unit running medical support for classified operations in Syria and Iraq. You were good at your job. Too good. She closed her eyes. They knew everything. Operation Night Falcon. November 2017. Your unit discovered an off-book research facility in northern Syria. Except it wasn't a terrorist lab. It was ours, funded through shell companies, staffed by contractors, running experiments that would make Nuremberg look like a parking ticket. Sarah's hands tightened on the rifle. Your commanding officer, Captain James Rourke, tried to do the right thing. Tried to report what you'd found. And 48 hours later, the entire facility was hit by an airstrike. Everyone declared KYA. Bodies too damaged to identify. Clean ending. Except you survived, the voice continued. You and maybe 2 others. You ran, changed your name, disappeared into civilian life. And for 7 years, you kept your head down and hoped we'd never find you. A car door slammed below. Sarah shifted position, watching 3 more operatives exit one of the SUVs. They were gearing up, checking weapons, preparing for a building sweep. Here's what's going to happen, the voice said. You're going to walk out of wherever you're hiding. You're going to put down your weapon, and you're going to come with us quietly. Do that, and this ends tonight. Nobody else gets hurt. Sarah keyed the radio. And if I don't? Then we classify this as a terrorist attack. Armed nurse with PTSD goes on a shooting spree. We kill everyone who saw your face tonight. Blame you for all of it. And your name, your real name, gets buried so deep even your mother won't remember you existed. Her mother had been dead for 12 years. But the threat was clear. She heard footsteps in the stairwell below. They were coming. Sarah moved quickly to the opposite side of the parking level, putting distance between herself and the access point. She found a concrete support column and positioned herself behind it, rifle aimed at the stairwell door. 2 operatives emerged, moving in textbook clearing formation, night vision goggles, suppressed rifles, probably using thermal imaging to track her heat signature. She aimed at the overhead fluorescent lights and fired twice. Glass shattered. The parking level plunged into darkness. The operatives switched to infrared. Sarah had already moved, circling around behind them, using the parked cars as cover. She came up on the first man's blind side and struck him in the kidney with the rifle butt. He dropped hard. She caught his weapon before it hit the ground. The second operative spun, raising his rifle. Sarah kicked his knee sideways. He went down screaming. She disarmed him with 2 quick strikes and left both men groaning on the concrete. She was moving toward the ramp when she heard tires squealing. More vehicles were arriving, not tactical. These were police cruisers, light bars flashing, skidding to stops near the hospital entrance. Sarah watched from the shadows as Carson Falls PD officers piled out, taking cover behind their vehicles, weapons drawn. They were shouting at the contractors, demanding they identify themselves and drop their weapons. The contractors didn't drop anything. What happened next happened fast. One of the contractors made a move that looked aggressive. A cop fired. Then everyone was firing. Muzzle flashes lit up the parking lot like strobe lights. The contractors had better training and better weapons, but the cops had numbers and backup already en route. Sarah used the chaos to slip down the ramp to ground level. She needed to get back inside the hospital, needed to make sure Morrison and the staff were actually evacuating and not stuck in lockdown. She reached the loading dock entrance and found it blocked by 2 more operatives. They hadn't seen her yet. She was considering her options when she heard a voice behind her. Don't move. Sarah froze. Drop the rifle, slowly. She let the weapon fall to the pavement. Turn around. Hands where I can see them. She turned. The man facing her was older, maybe 50. Gray stubble on his jaw, eyes that had seen too many operations like this one. His name tape read Kellerman. He had his sidearm aimed at her chest, finger on the trigger, stance professional. Lieutenant Brennan, he said. You're a hard woman to kill. I've had practice. So I've heard. He gestured with the pistol. Walk. Toward the SUVs. You try anything stupid, I put 2 in your spine. Sarah started walking. Her mind was racing, calculating angles, distances, probabilities. Kellerman stayed 6 feet back, too far to rush him without getting shot, close enough to compensate if she tried to run. They reached the SUVs. The gunfight between the contractors and police had died down to sporadic shots. Someone was calling for a ceasefire. Someone else was demanding to speak to a supervisor. Kellerman guided Sarah toward the middle vehicle. Get in, back seat. She climbed in. The This interior smelled like coffee and gun oil. Kellerman slid in beside her, pistol still raised. The driver's door opened. A woman got in, late 30s, dark hair pulled back, suit jacket over body armor. She looked at Sarah in the rearview mirror. "So you're the ghost," she said. Sarah didn't respond. The woman started the engine. "I'm Director Voss, Defense Intelligence Agency. You and I need to have a conversation." "About what?" "About the people who want you dead, about why Night Falcon is still classified after 7 years, and about whether you'd like to keep breathing long enough to see morning." The SUV pulled out of the parking lot, tires crunching over broken glass. Through the window, Sarah could see police officers securing the perimeter, ambulances arriving for the wounded contractors, news vans already setting up on the street. Kellerman kept his weapon trained on her the entire drive. They headed north out of Carson Falls, into the mountains. The road twisted through dense forest. No streetlights. Nothing but darkness and trees. After 30 minutes, they turned onto an unmarked access road and drove another 10 minutes before stopping at what looked like an abandoned ranger station. Voss killed the engine. Out. Inside the building, someone had set up a temporary operations center. Laptops on folding tables, satellite uplinks, encrypted radios, 3 more people in suits and tactical gear, all of them armed. Voss pointed at a metal chair in the center of the room. "Sit." Sarah sat. Kellerman positioned himself behind her, close enough to intervene if she tried anything. Voss pulled up a second chair and sat facing Sarah, knees almost touching. She opened a tablet and turned it so Sarah could see the screen. Photographs. Surveillance images. Documents with heavy black redactions. "Operation Night Falcon," Voss said. "Joint Task Force Operation 2017, Northern Syria. Officially, your unit was providing medical support for a counterterrorism mission. Unofficially, you stumbled onto something you weren't supposed to find." Sarah stared at the screen. One of the photos showed a concrete facility built into a hillside. Another showed rows of steel cages. A third showed children. Her throat tightened. "That facility was funded through a program called Silverline," Voss continued. "Black budget. No congressional oversight. The goal was to develop accelerated trauma conditioning protocols for military applications. They were testing experimental drugs, behavioral modification techniques, genetic therapies. The test subjects were children displaced by the war. Nobody who'd be missed." "We tried to stop it," Sarah said quietly. "I know you did. Captain Rourke filed a report through official channels. 3 hours later, the facility was hit by an airstrike. 27 people killed instantly. Rourke, your medic team, the research staff, the children, all gone." "Not all of us." "No," Voss agreed. "You survived. So did Sergeant Tyler Marsh, maybe 1 or 2 others. The military declared everyone KIA because it was easier than explaining why American personnel were inside an unauthorized research facility conducting experiments on foreign nationals." Sarah looked up at her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Silverline didn't end with Night Falcon. It just went deeper underground. And the people running it have spent 7 years making sure nobody who knows about it survives long enough to talk. So why am I still alive?" Voss leaned back in her chair. "Because you're useful. You're a first-hand witness. You saw the facility. You treated the children. You have information that could bring down a network of very powerful people. And you want me to testify. I want you to help me burn them to the ground." Kellerman shifted behind her. Sarah glanced back at him, then returned her attention to Voss. "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," Voss said flatly. "But right now, I'm the only option you have. The contractors who hit the hospital tonight were hired by Silverline's backers. They know you're alive. They know where you've been hiding. And they're not going to stop until you're dead. Or until I disappear again. You can't disappear anymore. Your face is on every security camera in that hospital. Local cops have already filed reports. By morning, your story will be on the news. Mysterious nurse with military training fights off armed attackers. You think Silverline is going to let that slide?" Sarah's hands curled into fists on her knees. Voss stood and walked to one of the laptops. She pulled up another file. "We've been investigating Silverline for 2 years. We've identified 7 active facilities. We've traced funding through 4 shell corporations, but we can't move on any of it without hard evidence, without testimony from someone who was there. You have files, documents. We have redacted reports and accounting records. That's not enough to take down a senator and 3 Pentagon officials. Sarah's head snapped up. A senator? Senator Raymond Cross, Armed Services Committee. He's been channeling defense appropriations into Silverline for 8 years. The experiments you saw in Syria, they're happening right now in Montana, Nevada, and Virginia. Different children, same nightmare. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. How many? We estimate 40 to 60 kids across all facilities. Most of them were taken from unstable homes, foster systems, places where nobody's looking too hard. They're being held in isolation, subjected to experimental treatments, conditioned for potential deployment in military operations. They're making child soldiers. That's our assessment. Sarah stood abruptly. Kellerman's hand went to his sidearm, but Voss raised a hand to stop him. What do you need from me? Sarah asked. I need you to go on record, full deposition, everything you saw at the Syria facility. Then I need you to help us identify the people who ran it. We have names, but we need faces. And if I do this, we enter you into protective custody until the investigation concludes. Once we have indictments, you testify before a closed grand jury. After that, we can offer you witness protection, relocation, new identity. I already have a new identity. Not anymore, you don't. Sarah walked to the window. Through the glass, she could see nothing but forest and darkness. Somewhere out there, people were hunting her. People with resources, connections, and 7 years of practice making witnesses disappear. She thought about the children in those cages, about the ones who died in the airstrike, about the ones still locked up right now, waiting for someone to save them. When do we start? She asked. Voss checked her watch. 6 hours. We have a secure facility in Portland. We'll transport you there at first light, start the deposition process, and begin building the case. What about the hospital, Morrison and the staff? They're being debriefed by local FBI. We've instructed them to classify tonight's events as an attempted robbery gone wrong. The contractors who survived are being charged with assault and weapons violations. Their employers will disavow them within 24 hours. Sarah turned back to face her. You're good at making things disappear. I'm good at keeping witnesses alive long enough to put bad people in prison. There's a difference. Kellerman gestured toward a side room. There's a cot in there. I suggest you get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Sarah didn't move. I want to know something first. What? How did they find me? I've been careful. 7 years without a single mistake. How did they know I was at Riverside General? Voss exchanged a glance with Kellerman. Something passed between them, something Sarah couldn't read. We're still investigating that, Voss said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Sarah studied her face. Voss was lying, or at least withholding something, but pushing wouldn't get her anywhere tonight. She walked into the side room. It was barely larger than a closet, with a narrow cot, a pillow, and a scratchy wool blanket. She lay down without removing her shoes. Through the thin walls, she could hear Voss and Kellerman talking in low voices. You think she'll cooperate? Kellerman asked. She doesn't have a choice. She's been running for 7 years. She's good at disappearing. Not anymore. We made sure of that. Sarah's eyes opened in the darkness. We made sure of that. She sat up slowly, her mind piecing together fragments of information that suddenly aligned in a pattern she hadn't seen before. The K-9 at the hospital, the dog that had recognized her despite 7 years of separation, the contractors who'd arrived within an hour of the alert, the precise timing of everything. Voss had said they'd been investigating Silverline for 2 years, that they needed testimony, that they needed evidence. But what if they'd done more than just investigate? What if they'd used Sarah as bait? She stood and walked quietly to the door, pressing her ear against it. The voices outside had stopped. She heard movement, keyboards clicking, someone making coffee. Sarah looked around the small room. No windows, one door, no other exits. She was trapped. But if Voss had orchestrated tonight, if she'd deliberately exposed Sarah's location to draw out Silverline's contractors, then Sarah wasn't a witness being protected. She was leverage being positioned. And the moment Voss got what she needed, Sarah would become a liability all over again. She sat back down on the cot, her mind racing through scenarios, calculating odds, planning contingencies. She'd survived 7 years by trusting her instincts. Right now, her instincts were screaming that Director Voss was playing a game Sarah didn't fully understand yet, and games like this only ended one way, with someone getting sacrificed. Outside, dawn was still hours away. But Sarah wasn't going to wait until morning to find out if she was the witness or the sacrifice. She lay back down, closed her eyes, and counted the seconds between footsteps in the next room. Kellerman patrolled every 12 minutes. Voss checked the laptops every 18. The third operative, the one Sarah hadn't gotten a good look at yet, seemed to be stationed near the front entrance. 3 guards, limited visibility, dense forest outside. If she was going to run, it had to be before they reached Portland. Because once they had her in a federal facility, surrounded by walls and armed agents and biometric locks, she'd never get out alive. She counted to 100, then 200. Then she stopped counting and started planning. And somewhere in the darkness outside the ranger station, a phone buzzed with an incoming message. The message was short. Target secured. Transport at 0600. Proceed to Phase 2. The response came back immediately. Confirmed. Eliminate all witnesses, no exceptions. Sarah heard the phone buzz through the wall. It was faint, muffled by distance and drywall, but she'd spent enough years in combat zones to recognize the distinct vibration pattern of an encrypted device receiving a priority message. The sound came from the main room where Voss had set up her operations center. Then silence. No voices. No response. Just the hum of electronics and the creak of someone shifting weight in a chair. Sarah lay perfectly still on the cot, eyes open in the darkness, listening. Her body wanted to move, wanted to act, but 7 years of staying alive had taught her that patience was a weapon too. Kellerman's footsteps approached the door. He paused outside, close enough that Sarah could hear his breathing through the gap at the threshold. "She asleep?" Voss asked from across the room. "Looks like it." "Good. We move in 90 minutes. I want her sedated for transport." Sarah's pulse jumped, but she kept her breathing steady, slow, the rhythm of someone deep in exhausted sleep. "Sedated?" Kellerman said. "I thought we were bringing her in as a witness." "We are. But I'm not taking chances. She's trained, she's desperate, and she's got nothing to lose. Last thing I need is her trying something stupid on the highway." Footsteps moved away from the door. Sarah counted to 30, then slowly sat up. The room was completely dark, except for a thin line of light bleeding under the door from the main room. She stood carefully, testing each floorboard before putting her full weight down. The window she'd noticed earlier wasn't actually a window, just a painted rectangle meant to look like one from the outside. No ventilation grate, no ceiling access. The only way out was through the door, past 3 armed federal agents, into a room full of surveillance equipment. Not ideal odds. But Sarah had survived worse. She moved to the door and pressed her ear against it again. Voss was on the phone now, voice low but audible. "Yes, sir. We have her secured." "No, sir. She doesn't suspect." "Understood. Once we reach the facility, we'll proceed with the extraction protocol. The children are collateral. We need the names at the top." "Yes, sir. Senator Cross has been briefed." Sarah's stomach dropped. Senator Cross had been briefed. The same Senator Cross that Voss claimed was running Silverline. She pulled back from the door, her mind racing. Voss wasn't investigating Silverline. She was working for them. The entire operation, the raid on the hospital, the tactical extraction, the story about building a case, it was all theater. They'd flushed Sarah out of hiding to eliminate her, but when that failed, they'd pivoted to extraction. They were going to interrogate her, find out what she knew, who she'd talked to, whether any other members of her unit had survived. Then they'd kill her and bury her so deep nobody would ever find the body. She needed to move. Now. Sarah went back to the cot and pulled up the thin mattress. The bed frame was bolted to the floor, but the metal rails had screws holding them in place. She worked one screw loose using the edge of her hospital ID badge, twisting slowly to avoid noise. It took 4 minutes to remove the first screw completely. She had 3 more to go and maybe 80 minutes before they came for her with sedatives and zip ties. Outside the room, Kellerman's radio crackled. "Unit 2 in position on the access road. No movement detected." "Copy that," Kellerman replied. "Maintain position. We transport in 70 minutes." Sarah worked faster. Her fingers were cramping, the plastic edge of the badge starting to crack, but she got the second screw out. The metal rail was loosening. 2 more and she'd have a weapon. Not a great one, but better than nothing. 15 minutes later, she had the rail free. It was about 18 inches long, solid steel, rounded on one end where it had connected to the bed frame. Heavy enough to do damage, quiet enough to use without alerting everyone in the building. She positioned herself beside the door, rail held low against her leg, and waited. The minutes crawled past. She could hear Voss typing on one of the laptops, Kellerman pacing. The third operative, still unidentified, was silent, probably stationed at the front entrance like before. At 5:47 a.m., Voss stood up. Kellerman, prep the sedative, standard protocol. We move in 10 minutes. Copy. Sarah heard a case being opened, medical supplies being arranged. Kellerman's footsteps approached the door. She took a breath and let it out slowly. The door opened inward. Kellerman stood silhouetted in the doorframe, syringe in one hand, flashlight in the other. He swept the beam across the room and found the empty cot. Sarah hit him in the kidney with the metal rail. He went down hard, syringe skittering across the floor. She caught the flashlight before it fell, twisted it off, and stepped over him into the main room. Voss was already reaching for her sidearm. Sarah threw the flashlight. It hit Voss in the chest, buying Sarah 2 seconds to close the distance. She grabbed Voss's gun hand and twisted, forcing the weapon toward the ceiling. They struggled. Voss was strong, well-trained, but Sarah had spent years in close-quarter combat scenarios where hesitation meant death. She kneed Voss in the solar plexus. The director gasped and stumbled back. Sarah ripped the weapon from her grip and turned toward the front entrance. The third operative was already moving, raising his rifle. Sarah fired twice. Both rounds hit center mass. The man went down. She spun back toward Voss, who was on the ground, clutching her stomach, wheezing. "You just assaulted a federal agent," Voss gasped. "You're not federal. You're private contract working for Silverline." Sarah kept the weapon trained on her. "I heard your phone call. Senator Cross has been briefed. You're not investigating him. You're working for him." Voss's expression shifted. The pretense dropped away like a mask. "Smart," she said. "Smarter than we gave you credit for. How long have you been on their payroll? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Voss sat up slowly, still catching her breath. 4 years. They recruited me after I started asking questions about black budget programs. Gave me a choice. Join the team or join the casualties. I chose survival. You chose wrong. Did I? I'm still breathing. My family's still safe. I have a pension waiting when this is over. What do you have, Lieutenant? A fake name and a hospital job you'll never see again? Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. Behind her, Kellerman was groaning, trying to sit up. The third operative wasn't moving. "You can't win this," Voss said. "Even if you kill me, even if you run, they'll find you. They have resources you can't imagine. Surveillance networks, facial recognition, satellite tracking. You'll last maybe a week before they put you down like a dog. Then I better make the week count." Sarah grabbed one of the laptops from the folding table, tucked it under her arm, and backed toward the front door. Kellerman was on his feet now, fumbling for his weapon. Sarah fired a round into the wall beside his head. He froze. "Stay down," she said. "Both of you. Don't follow me. Don't call for backup. Because if I hear sirens, I'm going to assume you violated our agreement, and I'm going to come back here and finish what I started." She stepped outside into the pre-dawn darkness. The air was cold, sharp with pine scent. She could see the access road stretching away through the trees, could see the faint glow of vehicle lights about a quarter-mile down where Unit 2 was supposedly waiting. She ran in the opposite direction. The forest was dense, the ground uneven. Sarah moved as quickly as she dared, using the rifle she'd taken from the third operative as a balance aid. Behind her, she heard shouting. Kellerman was on the radio calling for backup. Voss was probably coordinating a manhunt. Sarah had maybe 15 minutes before the forest was crawling with armed contractors. She ran for 10 minutes straight, then stopped to catch her breath and check the laptop. It was password protected, but she'd grabbed one that was still logged in. She pulled up the file directory and started copying everything she could onto a thumb drive she'd found in the bag with the laptop. Documents, photographs, financial records, encrypted files she couldn't open but copied anyway. The transfer took 3 minutes. She pocketed the thumb drive and left the laptop at the base of a tree. Too heavy to carry. Too slow to run with. Then she kept moving. The forest began to thin as the elevation dropped. She could see lights in the distance, a highway maybe, or a small town. Civilization. Witnesses. Places where Silverline couldn't operate openly. She was half a mile from the ranger station when she heard the helicopter. The sound came from the north, rotors cutting through the dawn air. Sarah looked up and saw the spotlight sweeping through the trees, methodically searching each section of forest. They weren't waiting for her to make a mistake. They were hunting her like an animal. She changed direction, heading downhill toward a creek she could hear but not yet see. Water would mask her thermal signature. Thick vegetation would break up her silhouette. If she could reach the creek and follow it downstream, she might lose them long enough to reach the highway. The helicopter swung closer. The spotlight swept past her position, paused, then swept back. They'd seen her. Sarah ran. The forest floor was a maze of roots and fallen logs and loose rocks. She vaulted over a deadfall, stumbled on the landing, caught herself, kept moving. Behind her, the helicopter was descending, finding gaps in the canopy to get a better angle. Gunfire erupted. Rounds tore through branches, kicked up dirt beside her feet. She zigzagged, using trees for cover, moving erratically to avoid presenting a stable target. The creek appeared ahead, maybe 30 yards down a steep embankment. Sarah didn't slow down. She hit the slope at a full sprint, lost her footing, and tumbled the last 15 feet, slamming into rocks and brush before splashing into icy water. The current grabbed her immediately. The creek was deeper than it looked, swollen with snowmelt from the mountains. Sarah fought to keep her head above water, to keep hold of the rifle, to keep moving downstream. The helicopter swept overhead, spotlight stabbing through the trees. But the water was churning, the canopy thick, and Sarah was moving fast enough that thermal imaging would have trouble locking on. She let the current carry her for 200 yards before grabbing onto a fallen log and pulling herself onto the bank. Her scrubs were soaked, her body shaking from cold and adrenaline, but she was alive. She checked the thumb drive. Still in her pocket, still intact. The helicopter was circling back, searching the area where she'd entered the water. They hadn't tracked her downstream yet. Sarah moved through the underbrush parallel to the creek, putting distance between herself and the search area. The forest was starting to lighten as dawn approached. She needed to find shelter, needed to dry out, needed to figure out her next move. A quarter-mile downstream, she found a hunting blind built into the side of a rocky outcrop. It was old, half collapsed, but it had a roof and 3 walls, and it was hidden from aerial view by a thick stand of Douglas fir. She crawled inside and collapsed. For 5 minutes, she just breathed. Let her heart rate come down. Let her mind catch up with everything that had happened in the past 8 hours. Then she pulled out of the thumb drive and examined it. No visible damage. The casing was waterproof military grade. She had evidence, real evidence, files that could expose Silverline, maybe even bring down Senator Cross and everyone connected to him. But evidence was worthless if she couldn't get it to someone who'd use it. Voss was compromised. The DIA was compromised. Local law enforcement was probably already being fed cover stories about a dangerous fugitive with PTSD. She couldn't trust anyone in the government, which meant she needed to go outside the government. Sarah's mind went to the one person from her old unit who might still be alive, Sergeant Tyler Marsh. They'd separated after the airstrike, agreed to never contact each other, to stay buried and stay alive. But Marsh had been a communications specialist. If anyone knew how to get sensitive information to the right people without getting killed in the process, it would be him. The problem was finding him. She'd spent 7 years specifically not looking for survivors because looking meant leaving traces. Digital footprints, search queries, anything that could lead Silverline back to her or to them. But she didn't have 7 years anymore. She barely had 7 hours. Sarah left the hunting blind and continued downstream. The creek eventually fed into a larger river, and the river ran past a small town called Brightwood, population maybe 2,000, mostly logging families and retirees. She reached the outskirts just after 7 a.m. The town was waking up. Trucks rolling past, diner lights turning on, school buses beginning their routes. Sarah stayed in the tree line, watching. She needed clothes, a vehicle, and a way to contact Marsh without using any device that could be traced back to her. She spotted a community center with a donation bin outside. She waited until the street was clear, then crossed quickly and dug through the bin. Found jeans that were close to her size, a flannel shirt, a jacket that smelled like cigarettes but was warm. She changed behind a dumpster, stuffed her scrubs deep into the bin, and emerged looking like a local who'd had a rough night. Nobody gave her a second glance. She walked into the diner and ordered coffee and toast, paid cash, and asked the waitress if there was a library in town. 2 blocks east, the woman said. Opens at 9. Sarah sat in a corner booth and waited. The coffee was terrible but hot. The toast settled her stomach. Through the window, she watched cars pass, watched people going about their morning routines, completely unaware that less than 10 miles away, a covert military operation was hunting a woman who knew too much. At 8:55, she walked to the library. It was a small building, brick facade, probably built in the 1960s. The librarian was unlocking the front door when Sarah arrived. "Early bird," the woman said cheerfully. "Need to check my email," Sarah replied. "Phone died." "Computers are in the back. Let me get them booted up." Sarah waited while the librarian went through her opening routine, turning on lights, logging into systems, checking returned books. 5 minutes later, Sarah was sitting at a public computer with internet access. She created a burner email account using fake credentials, then navigated to an old military forum she remembered from her active duty days. It was a place where veterans shared stories, asked for advice, posted reunion information. She logged in using a generic username and posted a single message in the classified section. Looking for T. Marsh. Served 2015 to 2017. Family emergency. Please contact. Then she included the burner email address and logged out. It was a long shot. Marsh might not check the form, might not see the message, might not respond even if he did. But it was all she had. She spent the next hour using the library computer to read the files on the thumb drive. Most of them were heavily redacted or encrypted, but enough was visible to paint a picture of Silverline's current operations. 3 active facilities in the United States, 1 in Montana, 1 in Nevada, 1 in Virginia. Estimated 62 children in custody. Funding traced back to shell companies controlled by defense contractors and pharmaceutical corporations. Personnel files on 17 researchers and 9 military contractors. And a single unredacted memo dated 6 weeks earlier that made Sarah's blood run cold. Subject: Phase 3. Authorization pursuant to congressional oversight exemptions. Under the 2019 Defense Innovation Act, Silverline facilities are authorized to proceed with Phase 3 human trials. Subjects meeting age and health criteria may be transferred to operational deployment training beginning Q2 2024. Expected attrition rate, 30 to 40%. Acceptable losses. Sarah read it twice to make sure she understood. They were planning to deploy the children, use them in actual military operations, and they expected a third of them to die. She copied the memo to a separate file and saved it to the thumb drive. Then she checked the burner email. No response yet. She waited another hour, checked again. Still nothing. At 10:30, the librarian approached. "Just so you know, we have a 2-hour limit on computer use. You've got about 15 minutes left." "Thanks." Sarah stared at the screen. No message from Marsh, no way to contact him directly. No time to wait. She needed a different plan. She pulled up a news website and found the contact information for an investigative journalist named Rebecca Hale, who'd written extensively about military contractors and government oversight failures. Hale had broken several major stories about Pentagon corruption. If anyone would take Silverline seriously, it would be her. Sarah composed a careful email. "Ms. Hale, I have documentation of an active human experimentation program being conducted on American soil using children as test subjects. The program is funded through black budget allocations and involves current members of Congress. I have evidence, but I am being actively hunted by the people responsible. If you're interested, respond to this email within 24 hours. Do not attempt to verify my identity through official channels. Do not contact law enforcement. They are compromised." She attached 3 of the least sensitive files from the thumb drive, enough to prove she had real information, but not enough to expose everything if the email was intercepted. Then she hit send. She logged out, wiped the browser history, and left the library. Outside, the morning had turned gray, clouds rolling in from the west. Rain coming. Sarah walked to the edge of town and found an abandoned gas station with an overhang where she could wait out of sight. She sat on the concrete, back against the wall, and finally let exhaustion catch up with her. She'd been awake for more than 24 hours. Her body ached. Her hands were still shaking from the cold creek water. But she couldn't afford to sleep, couldn't afford to let her guard down. She thought about Morrison back at the hospital, about whether he'd survived the debrief, about whether he'd understand why she'd disappeared. She thought about Dr. Reeves and the nurses who'd spent 3 years treating her like she was invisible. She thought about the children in those facilities, locked in cages, subjected to experiments, waiting for someone to save them. And she thought about Captain Rourke, who tried to do the right thing and died for it. She was still thinking about Rourke when a pickup truck pulled into the abandoned gas station and stopped directly in front of her. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, dark-skinned, early 40s, wearing work clothes and a baseball cap. He looked at Sarah for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. "Lieutenant Brennan." Sarah's hand went to the stolen sidearm tucked into her waistband. The man raised both hands. "Easy. I'm not here to hurt you. Who are you?" "Tyler Marsh." Sarah stared at him. She hadn't seen Marsh in 7 years, but the voice was right, the posture was right, the eyes were right. "How did you find me?" "I've been monitoring that forum for 6 years, set up alerts for specific keywords. Your post triggered one of them. I tracked the IP address to this library, drove here as fast as I could. You shouldn't have come. They're looking for me. If they find you, they've been looking for me too. I'm tired of running." He lowered his hand slowly and pulled something from his jacket pocket, a thumb drive identical to the one Sarah was carrying. "I've been collecting evidence for 4 years," he said. "Files, recordings, testimony from 3 other survivors who've been hiding just like us. I was waiting for the right moment to release it. Looks like that moment just arrived." Sarah felt something shift in her chest. She wasn't alone anymore. "How many others?" she asked. 5 total, including us. Corporal Jessica Lang is in Alaska. Private Marcus Webb is in Florida. Staff Sergeant David Torres is in Texas. We've been coordinating through encrypted channels, piecing together everything we know about Silverline." "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" "Because we needed proof. Real proof. Not just testimony. They've already branded us as KIA. They'll brand us as delusional or traitors if we don't have ironclad evidence." Sarah pulled out her own thumb drive. "I have files from the current operation, facility locations, personnel, funding trails, and a memo authorizing deployment of the children." Marsh's jaw tightened. "Then we have enough." "Enough for what?" "To burn the whole thing down." He gestured towards his truck. "Get in. We need to move. There's a safe house 2 hours north. The others are already there. We're going public tomorrow morning with everything we have. Every news outlet, every watchdog organization, every member of Congress who isn't on Silverline's payroll." Sarah hesitated. 7 years of hiding had made trust almost impossible, but Marsh was right. Running was over. It was time to fight back. She climbed into the truck. Marsh pulled out of the gas station and headed north. They drove in silence for 10 minutes before he spoke again. "I heard about the hospital. Carson Falls PD is calling it a robbery. Federal agents are calling it domestic terrorism. Senator Cross is already on the news demanding increased security at medical facilities." "Cross knows I'm alive." "Yeah, which means we're on a clock. Once Silverline realizes we're coordinating, they'll move to contain us. We have maybe 12 hours before they come at us with everything they've got." "Then we move faster." Marsh glanced at her. "You look different, older. 7 years of pretending to be someone else will do that." "You regret it, going into hiding?" Sarah watched the forest blur past. "I regret not going public sooner. I regret letting those kids stay in cages while I played it safe." "You were staying alive." "I was being a coward. There's a difference between survival and cowardice." "Is there?" Marsh didn't answer. They drove for another hour, winding through mountain roads, before turning onto a private drive that led to a compound hidden in the trees. It was heavily fortified, chain-link fence, security cameras, reinforced doors. Marsh pulled up to the gate and entered a code. The gate swung open. "Who owns this place?" Sarah asked. "A friend. Former Delta. He's been helping us coordinate." They parked near the main building. Marsh led Sarah inside. The interior looked like a combination between a bunker and a war room. Maps on the walls, computers on tables, satellite phones, encrypted radios, and 3 people Sarah hadn't seen in 7 years. Jessica Lang looked up from a laptop. She was thinner than Sarah remembered, her hair cut short, a scar running along her jaw that hadn't been there before. "Holy hell, they said you were dead." So did everyone else. Marcus Webb stood from a table covered in documents. He'd aged harder than the others, lines deep around his eyes, gray starting at his temples. "Good to see you, Lieutenant." David Torres was on the phone but raised a hand in acknowledgement. He finished his call and walked over. Sarah. Damn. 7 years. 7 years, she echoed. Marsh set his keys on the table. She's got files from the current operation, personnel, locations, authorization memos. Torres whistled. That's the missing piece. We've been building the historical case, but we needed current proof that Silverline is still active. Lang closed her laptop. How much time do we have? Not enough, Sarah said. They know I have the files. They'll be coming. Let them come. Torres gestured at the compound. We're ready. Former Spec Ops guys providing security. Satellite uplink for redundant communications. Hard copy backups of everything stored off-site. They want to fight. We'll give them one. Sarah looked around the room. These were people who'd lost everything because they'd tried to do the right thing. They'd been erased, hunted, forced to live in shadows. But they hadn't given up. What's the plan? She asked. Marsh pulled up a digital map on one of the monitors. Tomorrow at 800, we simultaneously release everything to every major news outlet, every congressional oversight committee, and every international human rights organization. By noon, Silverline will be front-page news. By evening, arrests will start. And if they move on the facilities before arrests happen? We've already notified Child Protective Services in all 3 states through anonymous channels. The moment the story breaks, they'll have legal authority to raid the facilities and extract the children. Lang added, We've also been in contact with a network of lawyers willing to represent the children and their families. Pro bono. They're ready to file lawsuits the moment the story goes public. Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. What do you need from me? She asked. Your testimony, Marsh said, on camera. Full account of what you saw in Syria. Then we need you to walk through the files you stole, verify the information, connect the dots for anyone watching. When do we record? Now. We go live at dawn. They spent the next 6 hours preparing. Sarah gave her testimony, speaking directly into a camera, recounting every detail of Night Falcon and the facility they'd discovered. She walked through the stolen files, explaining the organizational structure, the funding mechanisms, the personnel involved. The others added their own testimonies, their own evidence, their own pieces of the puzzle. By midnight, they had everything compiled, verified, and ready to release. Torres leaned back in his chair. This is it. 7 years of hiding. Tomorrow, we stop hiding. Lang raised a bottle of water. To Captain Rourke, to the kids who didn't make it, and to the ones we're about to save. They touched bottles. Sarah set hers down without drinking. There's something you should know. Director Voss, the DIA agent who extracted me from the hospital, she's working for Silverline. She tried to sedate me for transport. I'm assuming there are others like her embedded in federal agencies. Webb frowned. How deep does this go? Deep enough that we can't trust anyone in the government until the story breaks. Then we don't, Marsh said. We bypass them entirely. Go straight to the press, straight to the public. Let the court of public opinion force the government's hand. Sarah walked to the window. Outside, the compound was dark except for perimeter lights. Security personnel patrolled in shifts. Everything looked calm. But calm never lasted. They're coming, she said quietly. Voss knows I have the files. Cross knows we're coordinating. They'll hit us before dawn. Torres checked his watch. We've got 7 hours until the scheduled release. If they hit us before then, the backup systems automatically upload everything to the cloud. Dead man switch. The story goes public whether we're alive or not. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be insurance. Sarah turned back to the room. How many security personnel do we have? 8. All former military, all well armed. 8 against however many contractors Silverline sends? We've got defensive positions, fortified structures, terrain advantage. They'll have helicopters, drones, thermal imaging. They'll surround us and wait us out or burn us out. Marsh stood. So what do you suggest? Sarah looked at the files scattered across the tables, at the equipment humming around them, at the people who'd risked everything to get this far. We don't wait for dawn, she said. We release it now, right now. Send everything out immediately and force their hand. We lose the media cycle, Lang protested. Nobody's watching the news at midnight. But it'll be on every server, every cloud backup, every news desk in the country by morning. They can't stop it once it's out there. And more importantly, they have no reason to kill us if the information is already public. Torres nodded slowly. She's right. The only reason to attack us now is to prevent the release. If we've already released it, we're not worth the risk. Marsh looked around the room. All in favor? Every hand went up. Do it, Marsh said. Lang's fingers flew across her keyboard. Uploading to primary servers. Done. Secondary servers. Done. Sending to news outlets. Done. Congressional committees. Done. Human rights organizations. Done. The room went silent as everyone watched the progress bars fill. Package delivered, Lang said. It's out there, all of it. Sarah exhaled. They'd done it. 7 years of hiding. 7 years of silence. And now the truth was spreading across the internet like wildfire. Impossible to contain. Impossible to delete. Torres pulled up a news monitoring feed. Within minutes, alerts started popping up. Breaking news banners. Live coverage. Headlines that would shake the country by morning. Military whistleblowers expose secret human experimentation program. Senator Raymond Cross implicated in child abuse scandal. Pentagon under fire. As Silverline documents surface. Webb laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. We actually did it. We're not done yet, Sarah said, because she could hear something in the distance. Engines. Multiple vehicles approaching fast. The compound's perimeter alarm started wailing. Red lights flashed. The security team mobilized, taking defensive positions. Through the window, Sarah could see headlights cutting through the forest, converging on their location from 3 directions. Marsh grabbed a radio. All units, defensive posture. Do not fire unless fired upon. Repeat, do not engage unless engaged. The vehicles stopped just outside the fence. Doors opened. Men in tactical gear emerged, weapons raised, but they didn't advance. They stood there, frozen, as if waiting for orders that weren't coming. Sarah understood immediately. The story was out. The world was watching. Silverline couldn't risk a massacre now, not with dozens of news organizations already picking up the story, not with congressional phones ringing off the hook. One of the contractors raised a megaphone. Lieutenant Brennan, we know you're inside. Come out. We just want to talk. Marsh looked at her. Don't. They can't touch me now, Sarah said. The evidence is already public. I'm a witness, not a threat. They'll still try to kill you. Let them try. Sarah walked to the front door and stepped outside. 20 weapons tracked her movement. Red laser dots painted her chest. She raised her hands and walked toward the fence. The contractor with the megaphone lowered it. He was older, maybe 60, gray hair under a tactical cap. His name patch read Sullivan. Smart move, Lieutenant. Releasing the files early caught us off guard. That was the idea. You realize what you've done? The people you've exposed? They won't forget this. Good. I don't want them to forget. Sullivan shook his head slowly. Senator Cross wants to speak with you. In person. Sarah almost laughed. Cross can speak to federal prosecutors. He's not being arrested. Not yet, and probably not ever. You think some documents and testimony are going to bring down a senator? He's already spinning this as a rogue operation he knew nothing about. By morning, he'll be calling for investigations and reforms. He'll come out of this looking like a hero. Not if I testify. You really think anyone will believe you? A discharged soldier with PTSD? A woman who's been living under a fake name for 7 years? Cross has lawyers who'll tear you apart on the stand. Then let them try. Sullivan studied her for a long moment. You're not afraid of dying, are you? I died 7 years ago. Everything since then has been borrowed time. He nodded, almost respectfully. The children from the facilities are being evacuated as we speak. Child Protective Services, federal marshals, news cameras everywhere. Silverline is done. The program's finished. Good. But Cross walks. So does half the oversight committee. So does everyone with enough power to bury this deeper than you can imagine. You exposed the program, Lieutenant. Congratulations. But you didn't kill the monster. You just cut off one of its heads. Sarah stepped closer to the fence. Then I'll spend the rest of my life cutting off the others. Sullivan's radio crackled. He listened, then looked back at Sarah. We're pulling out. Our contract just got terminated. You're on your own now. I've been on my own for 7 years. The contractors retreated to their vehicles. Engines started. Within minutes, they were gone. disappearing back into the forest. Sarah stood at the fence, watching the taillights fade. Behind her, Marsh emerged from the compound. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. What now? Sarah turned to face him. Now we make sure those children get real help, real therapy, real families. And we make sure everyone who enabled Silverline faces justice, even if it takes the rest of our lives. You know they'll come after us again. Different names, different contracts, but they'll come. Let them. The sky was starting to lighten in the east. Dawn coming. A new day. Sarah thought about the quiet nurse she'd been for 3 years. The invisible woman nobody respected or remembered. That person was gone now. In her place stood someone who'd fought through hell, exposed a military conspiracy, and saved dozens of children from a nightmare. Someone who wouldn't stay quiet anymore. Someone who wouldn't run. Inside the compound, alarms started going off again. Different alarms this time. Emergency alerts on every device. Torres appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "We've got a problem," he said. Sarah and Marsh ran inside. The news feeds on the monitors had changed. The Silverline story was still breaking, still spreading, but now there was something else. A new headline flashing red across every major network. Senator Raymond Cross found dead in home. Apparent suicide. Lang pulled up the full story. He's dead. They found him an hour ago. Single gunshot wound. Note left behind confessing to everything. Webb stared at the screen. They killed him. Made it look like suicide, tied off the loose end. Sarah felt ice spreading through her chest. Because if Cross was dead, then the investigation would die with him. His confession would be enough to close the case. Everyone else involved would scatter, cover their tracks, disappear into the bureaucracy. And the children would get justice, but the people who'd enabled the horror would walk free. No, Sarah said quietly. No what? Marsh asked. No, this doesn't end with Cross dead and everyone else hiding. We have names, we have faces, we have the financial trail. We're going to track down every single person connected to Silverline, and we're going to make sure they answer for what they did. Torres looked at her. That could take years. Then it takes years. You're talking about hunting some of the most powerful people in the country. People with resources, protection. People who know how to make problems disappear. Sarah met his eyes. I've been a problem they couldn't make disappear for 7 years. I'm not stopping now. Outside, the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Somewhere in Montana, Nevada, and Virginia, children were waking up in hospitals instead of cages, surrounded by people who would help them instead of hurt them. Somewhere in Washington, D.C., powerful men were burning documents and erasing hard drives and calling lawyers. And somewhere in the compound hidden in the forest, a woman who'd been declared dead 7 years ago was planning her next move. Because the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The news cycle moved faster than Sarah expected. By noon, every major network was running the Silverline story on a loop. Senators were calling for emergency hearings. The Pentagon was issuing carefully worded denials. Social media was exploding with hashtags demanding accountability. But Senator Cross's death had already started reshaping the narrative. Sarah stood in the compound's communications room, watching a press conference from the Department of Defense. A spokesman in a crisp uniform stood behind a podium, reading from prepared statements. Senator Raymond Cross's tragic death reminds us of the tremendous pressure our elected officials face. While investigations into the alleged Silverline program are ongoing, we must be cautious about accepting unverified claims from sources with potential mental health concerns. Marsh slammed his hand on the table. Mental health concerns. They're already setting up the defense. Of course they are, Torres said. Cross is dead. He can't defend himself. So they paint him as a troubled public servant who got involved in something he didn't understand, and they paint us as unstable veterans with an axe to grind. Lang pulled up another feed. It's working. Look at this. The screen showed a cable news panel, 3 talking heads debating the credibility of the whistleblowers. One of them was already questioning whether the documents were authentic, whether the testimony was reliable, whether the whole thing might be an elaborate hoax. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. We gave them everything, personnel files, financial records, facility locations. How is that not enough? Because the people we're accusing have spent decades building credibility, Webb said quietly. They have titles, awards, Senate confirmations. We have trauma and desperation. We have the truth. The truth doesn't matter if nobody believes it. Sarah turned away from the monitors. She couldn't watch anymore. Couldn't listen to people dissect her credibility while children were still being processed through emergency medical evaluations, still trying to understand that they were finally safe. Her phone, one of the secure burner devices Marsh had provided, buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Yes? Lieutenant Brennan, my name is Rachel Vinson. I'm an attorney with the National Civil Liberties Foundation. I've been reviewing the documents your team released. And I'd like to represent you, pro bono. I've spent 15 years fighting government overreach and corporate malfeasance. This is exactly the kind of case we take. Sarah walked to a quieter corner of the room. What makes you think I need representation? Because Director Voss filed charges against you this morning. Assault on a federal officer, theft of classified documents, obstruction of justice. The DOJ is building a case to discredit you before you can testify about Silverline. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. How fast can they move? Fast. They'll push for an indictment within 48 hours. Arrest you before the congressional hearings even get scheduled. Once you're in custody, they control the narrative. So what do you suggest? Turn yourself in. Publicly. With legal representation and media present. Force them to treat you as a whistleblower instead of a fugitive. Own the story before they twist it. Sarah closed her eyes. Turning herself in meant trusting a system that had already tried to erase her once, but running meant validating every lie they were already spreading about her stability and credibility. I'll think about it, she said. Don't think too long. The warrant could be issued any time. The call ended. Marsh appeared beside her. What was that about? Voss is pressing charges. They want to arrest me before I can testify. Can they do that? They can do whatever they want. The question is whether anyone will stop them. Torres joined them, laptop under his arm. We've got another problem. The children from the facilities, they're not talking. Child Services tried interviewing them this morning. Every single kid refused to answer questions about what happened to them. Sarah felt a chill. Why? Conditioning. Silverline trained them not to trust authority figures, programmed them to stay silent under interrogation. Without their testimony, we can't prove the extent of the abuse. What about medical records? Physical evidence? Medical evaluations show signs of long-term malnutrition, sleep deprivation, psychological trauma, but nothing that definitively proves experimentation. Silverline was careful. They didn't leave marks that couldn't be explained away. Sarah walked back to the monitors. One of them showed footage from outside the Nevada facility. Federal agents were loading boxes into trucks while reporters shouted questions from behind police barriers. Another screen showed a Senate aide being interviewed, carefully suggesting that the facilities might have been legitimate foster care programs that were mismanaged rather than criminal operations. The spin was already working. We need one of the researchers, Sarah said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. The kids won't talk. The documents are being questioned. Cross is dead. But the people who ran those facilities, the doctors, the scientists, the administrators, they're still alive. We get one of them to flip, to testify about what they did, and the whole defense collapses. Lang pulled up the personnel files. We have names and last known locations for 17 Silverline researchers. But they've all lawyered up. Nobody's talking. Then we make them want to talk. Webb raised an eyebrow. How? Sarah studied the list of names. Most of them meant nothing to her, but one name triggered a memory from the Syria facility. Dr. Evelyn Harper. She'd been young back then, maybe late 20s, with the nervous energy of someone who knew she was participating in something wrong, but didn't have the courage to stop it. Harper, Sarah said, pointing at the screen. She was at the Syria facility. She treated one of the kids who got sick during the trials. I saw her crying in the medical bay after the child died. She had a conscience. Maybe she still does. Torres pulled up Harper's file. Currently residing in Bethesda, Maryland. Works for a private pharmaceutical research firm. No current connection to Silverline, according to public records. But she knows what happened. She was there. So were dozens of other people. What makes you think she'll talk to us? Sarah thought about the woman she'd seen 7 years ago, the one who'd looked at the dying child with genuine grief in her eyes. Because guilt is heavier than fear, and she's been carrying it for 7 years. Marsh crossed his arms. Even if you're right, even if she's willing to talk, approaching her is dangerous. Voss is hunting for you. Every law enforcement agency in the country has your face flagged. You can't just walk up to Harper's door. I'm not planning to. Sarah turned to Lang. Can you get a message to her? Anonymous, encrypted, something that won't trace back to us. Depends on what you want to say. Tell her I was at the Syria facility. Tell her I remember the child who died. Tell her I know she's been trying to forget but can't. And tell her that if she wants a chance to make it right, she needs to meet me. Lang's fingers moved across her keyboard. Where? Sarah considered the options. Somewhere public enough that Harper would feel safe. Somewhere quiet enough to have a real conversation. Somewhere with enough exits that Sarah could disappear if things went wrong. The National Mall. Lincoln Memorial. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. That's in Washington, D.C. You'll be walking into the heart of federal jurisdiction. Which is exactly why they won't expect it. Torres shook his head. This is a terrible idea. You have a better one? Nobody responded. Sarah looked around the room at the people who'd spent 7 years hiding just like she had. They were exhausted, worn down by years of looking over their shoulders, years of wondering when someone would finally find them. We can keep running, she said quietly. Keep hiding. Keep hoping someone else will finish what we started. Or we can finish it ourselves, force the confrontation, make them see us. Webb spoke first. I'm in. Lang nodded. Me too. Torres sighed. This is going to get us all arrested or killed. Probably both. Probably, Sarah agreed. Then I'm definitely in. Marsh was the last to respond. He walked to the window, stared out at the forest, then turned back. If we do this, we do it right. Full operational planning, backup protocols, extraction routes. We're not soldiers anymore, but we sure as hell remember how to act like them. They spent the next 18 hours preparing. Lang sent the encrypted message to Dr. Harper and received a response within 4 hours. A simple acknowledgement that she'd received it, followed by coordinates confirming the meeting location. Marsh arranged transportation through a network of veteran contacts who asked no questions. Webb coordinated surveillance equipment. Torres mapped backup routes and safe houses throughout the D.C. area. Sarah barely slept. She kept thinking about the children, about whether they were getting real help or just being shuffled through another system designed to process them instead of heal them. At dawn, they loaded into 2 vehicles and began the drive east toward Washington. Sarah rode with Marsh, watching the landscape change from mountain forest to rolling farmland to suburban sprawl. You know this could be a trap, Marsh said. It probably is. And you're going anyway. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Sarah looked at him. Did you have a choice when you decided to hide for 7 years? When you gave up your name, your family, your entire life? Marsh's hands tightened on the steering wheel. No, I didn't. Neither do I. Not anymore. They reached D.C. by early afternoon. The city was massive, overwhelming after years in small towns and rural areas. Sarah felt exposed in a way she hadn't since the hospital. Too many cameras, too many people, too many ways for someone to recognize her face. They parked 3 blocks from the National Mall. Webb and Torres took up surveillance positions at opposite ends of the memorial. Lang stayed with the vehicles, ready to provide emergency extraction if needed. Sarah and Marsh walked toward the Lincoln Memorial. The memorial was crowded with tourists despite the cold weather. Families taking photos. School groups listening to guides. People from all over the world standing in front of the massive statue, reading the inscribed words about freedom and equality. Sarah found the irony painful. She positioned herself on the south side of the memorial, near one of the stone columns, where she could watch the crowd while staying partially hidden. Marsh stood 30 feet away, pretending to read an information placard while keeping her in his peripheral vision. At 1:58 p.m., Sarah spotted her. Dr. Evelyn Harper looked older than Sarah remembered. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray. She wore a long coat and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She climbed the memorial steps slowly, scanning the crowd, clearly nervous. Sarah waited until Harper was close, then stepped into view. Harper froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Harper walked closer, stopping about 6 feet away. Lieutenant Brennan. Dr. Harper. You look different. So do you. Harper glanced around nervously. I shouldn't be here. If they find out I'm talking to you, they're not going to find out. You released classified information. The entire intelligence community is looking for you. I released evidence of crimes against children. There's a difference. Harper's jaw tightened. You don't understand what you've done. The people behind Silverline, they don't forgive. They don't forget. You've signed your own death warrant. Then I'll die knowing I tried to stop them. Stop them? You've barely slowed them down. Cross is dead. 2 facilities have been shut down. But the program continues. Different names, different locations. You think exposing one operation ends this? Sarah stepped closer. Then help me end it. Testify. Tell the world what happened in Syria. What happened to those children? I can't. Can't or won't? Harper pulled off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. I have a daughter. She's 9 years old, the same age as the children in that facility. If I testify, if I expose what I did, they'll take her from me, ruin her life to punish mine. They're threatening your daughter? They don't have to threaten. I know what happens to people who cross them. I've seen the bodies. I've read the reports. I know how this ends. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. Because Harper was right. The system was designed to protect itself, to punish anyone who challenged it, to make examples of whistleblowers so brutal that others would never dare follow. Then why did you come here? Sarah asked quietly. Harper's voice broke. Because I see that child every night, the one who died in the medical bay. I see his face, I hear him crying for his mother, and I can't make it stop. Then make it mean something. Testify. Put the people responsible in prison. Save the children who are still alive. I can't protect my daughter from inside a cell. You can't protect her by staying silent either. What happens when she grows up and finds out what you did? When she learns you watched children die and did nothing to stop it? Harper flinched like she'd been struck. Sarah pushed harder. You want to protect your daughter? Teach her that courage matters more than comfort. That doing the right thing is worth the risk. Show her what it means to stand up when everyone else is sitting down. You're asking me to sacrifice everything. I'm asking you to remember why you became a doctor. Harper turned away, staring at the massive statue of Lincoln behind them. I wanted to heal people, save lives. And instead I became part of something that destroyed children for military advantage. So fix it. How? Testimony won't bring them back. No, but it might save the ones who are still out there, the ones in facilities we haven't found yet, the ones who are going through right now what those children went through 7 years ago. Harper was silent for a long moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a thumb drive. I've been documenting everything since Syria, she said quietly. Medical protocols, experimental procedures, subject files, mortality rates. I told myself I was keeping records in case I ever needed to defend myself. But the truth is, I always knew someday I'd have to use them. Sarah stared at the drive. Why now? Because I saw the news coverage. I saw how they're spinning your testimony, how they're making you look unstable. I know what happens next. They discredit you, dismiss the documents, and Silverline disappears back into the shadows, unless someone with institutional credibility steps forward. You'd lose everything. I've already lost everything that matters. I just didn't realize it until now. Harper pressed the drive into Sarah's hand. There's enough on here to prosecute a dozen people, enough to prove the experiments happened, enough to show the chain of command all the way to the top. Will you testify? Yes, but I need guarantees, protection for my daughter, immunity from prosecution for my cooperation, witness protection after the trial. I can't promise any of that. Then find someone who can. Sarah heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Marsh approaching, his expression tense. We need to move, he said quietly. Now. What's wrong? Federal agents, 2 vehicles. They just pulled up to the parking area. Harper went pale. They followed me. Did you tell anyone you were coming here? No, I swear I didn't tell anyone. Sarah's mind raced. If Harper hadn't told anyone, then the agents weren't following her. They were following Sarah, which meant someone had tracked them to D.C. Anticipated the meeting, set up the trap. She grabbed Harper's arm. Come with us. What? You're burned. The moment they see you talking to me, you're compromised. Your only chance is to come with us right now. My daughter. We'll get her too, but we need to move. Marsh was already leading them down the south steps of the memorial, away from the approaching agents. Torres's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece. Multiple units converging, east and west sides. You've got maybe 90 seconds. They reached the bottom of the steps and merged into the crowd of tourists flowing along the reflecting pool. Sarah kept Harper close, using the bodies around them as cover while Marsh scouted ahead. Lang, we need extraction, Sarah said into her radio. Northeast corner, 3 passengers. Copy, 2 minutes. They cut across the grass, moving fast but not running. Running would draw attention. Harper was struggling to keep up, her breathing ragged. I can't do this, she gasped. Yes, you can. I'm not trained for this. I'm a researcher. I sit in labs. I don't run from federal agents. Today you do. They reached the tree line along the edge of the mall. Lang's vehicle appeared, rolling to a stop beside them. The doors flew open. Sarah pushed Harper inside first, then climbed in after her. Marsh took the front passenger seat. Go, he said. Lang hit the accelerator. The vehicle surged forward, merging into traffic just as the federal agents reached the spot where they'd been standing. Sarah watched through the rear window as the agents scrambled, trying to coordinate pursuit. But Lang was already 3 blocks away, taking turns that kept them ahead of the response. Where are we going? Harper asked, her voice shaking. Safe house, Marsh said. Virginia, about 40 minutes outside the city. They saw me. They saw me with you. I'm finished. You're alive. That's what matters. Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed the number Rachel Vinson had given her. The attorney answered on the second ring. Ms. Vinson, it's Sarah Brennan. I need your help. Right now. What happened? I have a witness, a Silver Line researcher willing to testify, but she needs protection, her and her daughter. Can you arrange that? Witness protection falls under DOJ. I can file the paperwork, but it takes time. We don't have time. Federal agents just tried to grab us at the Lincoln Memorial. They know who she is. They know she talked to me. Vinson was quiet for a moment. Where are you now? Secure location, but we can't stay here long. I'll make some calls, push for emergency protective custody. But Sarah, you need to understand something. The moment Dr. Harper enters the system, she loses control. They'll decide where she goes, who she talks to, what she's allowed to say. Are you ready for that? Sarah looked at Harper, who was staring out the window with tears streaming down her face. Ask her. She put the phone on speaker and handed it to Harper. Dr. Harper, Vinson said. I'm an attorney with NCLF. Lieutenant Brennan tells me you have evidence related to Silver Line. Yes, Harper whispered. And you're willing to testify? Yes. Even if it means losing your medical license, your career, possibly facing criminal charges? Harper closed her eyes. I just want my daughter safe. That's all I want. I'll do everything in my power to make that happen, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Harper looked at Sarah. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Harper nodded. Yes, I can trust you. The safe house was actually an old farmhouse owned by one of Webb's contacts. It sat on 12 acres of wooded property, far enough from the main road that approaching vehicles would be heard long before they arrived. They spent the evening going through the files on Harper's thumb drive. What Sarah found made her stomach turn. Detailed medical records on 43 children, experimental drug protocols that cause seizures, organ failure, psychological breaks, behavioral conditioning programs designed to suppress empathy and enhance aggression, mortality rates that climbed as high as 30% in some trial groups, and names, dozens of names, researchers, administrators, military liaisons, congressional staffers who'd signed off on budget allocations. Webb read through the files in silence, his face growing darker with each page. This is worse than we thought. It's everything we need, Torres said. With Harper's testimony and these records, we can prosecute everyone involved. If we survive long enough to get it to trial, Lang added. Sarah's phone buzzed. Text message from Vinson. Emergency custody approved. U.S. Marshals will extract Harper and her daughter at 0600 tomorrow. Location attached. Sarah showed the message to Harper. You're going into protection. You and your daughter both. Harper's hands were shaking. What happens to me after I testify? New identities, new city, financial support until you can establish yourself. So I disappear, just like you did. Yes, Harper laughed bitterly. 7 years ago, I watched you and your team try to save those children. I watched you fail. And I told myself that failure was proof that fighting back was pointless, that the system was too powerful, that the only way to survive was to keep your head down and follow orders. And now? Now I realize the real failure was mine. I survived, but I didn't live. The words hit Sarah harder than she expected. Because Harper was right, survival wasn't enough, not when it came at the cost of everything that made you human. At midnight, Sarah stepped outside. The air was cold, sharp with the smell of wood smoke from the farmhouse chimney. Stars were visible through breaks in the clouds. Marsh joined her on the porch. Can't sleep? Haven't been able to sleep properly in 7 years. Yeah, I know that feeling. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds. Owls, wind through bare trees, the distant sound of a highway. What happens after this? Marsh asked. After Harper testifies. After the trials. After Silverline is officially dead and buried. I don't know. You going back to nursing? Sarah thought about Riverside General, about Dr. Reeves and the nurses who'd treated her like she was invisible, about Morrison and his K-9 partner who'd recognized her when nobody else had. No, she said. I can't go back to being invisible. Not after this. So what then? There are more programs like Silverline, more operations that exploit people who can't fight back, more children being used as test subjects. Maybe I spend the rest of my life finding them, exposing them. That's a lonely way to live. I've been lonely for 7 years. At least now I'll be lonely for a reason. Marsh smiled slightly. You know you're not alone in this, right? We're all here. All of us who survived. We're not going away. Sarah looked at him. Why did you help me? When you saw my message on the forum, you could have ignored it, kept hiding, stayed safe. Because I'm tired of being safe, tired of waking up every morning wondering if today's the day they find me. Tired of living like I'm already dead. He paused. And because Rourke would have helped you, so I figured I should too. They heard a vehicle approaching. Both of them tensed until they recognized Lang's signal pattern with the headlights. She parked and climbed out, laptop under her arm. We've got movement. News breaking in the last hour. They went inside. Lang pulled up the news feed on the main monitor. A breaking headline scrolled across the screen. Former Pentagon official arrested in Silverline scandal. The story was still developing, but the details were already explosive. Daniel Grayson, former Deputy Director of Defense Research, had been arrested at his home in Arlington. Prosecutors were charging him with conspiracy, fraud, and crimes against humanity. Torres whistled. They're actually doing it, actually arresting people. Grayson's a mid-level bureaucrat, Webb said. He's not the top. They're giving him up to protect the real decision-makers. Maybe, Sarah said. Or maybe this is the beginning. Maybe Grayson flips, testifies against his bosses, starts a chain reaction. Her phone rang. Vincent. Did you see the news? The attorney asked. Just now. This changes everything. DOJ is moving faster than expected. They want Harper's testimony within 48 hours. They're convening a grand jury. That's fast. They have to move fast. The longer this drags out, the more time Silverline's backers have to destroy evidence and intimidate witnesses. Strike while the public's paying attention. What about me? The assault charges against you are being quietly dropped. Voss has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. You're still a person of interest, but you're not a target. Not anymore. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief, exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. We still have a long road ahead. But Lieutenant, you did it. You exposed them. You started the collapse. Now we finish it. The call ended. Sarah looked around the room at the people who'd spent 7 years hiding with her. People who'd given up their names, their families, their entire lives to stay alive. Harper testifies in 2 days, she said. After that, the trials start. Congressional hearings, media coverage, the whole country watching. And us? Torres asked. We make sure they can't spin it, can't bury it, can't make it disappear. We stay visible, stay loud, force them to confront what they did. Webb nodded slowly. So we become the story. We already are the story, now we control how it's told. The next morning, U.S. Marshals arrived to transport Harper and her daughter into protective custody. Sarah watched them leave, watched the convoy of unmarked vehicles disappear down the long driveway. Then she went back inside and opened her laptop. She created a new document, titled it simply Testimony, and she began to write. Everything she'd seen in Syria, everything she'd witnessed over the past week, names, dates, locations, details that couldn't be twisted or dismissed or explained away. The truth, in her own words. When she finished, it was 63 pages long. She sent it to Vincent, to every congressional oversight committee, to 20 different news organizations, to human rights groups and watchdog agencies, and anyone else who might use it to hold powerful people accountable. Then she waited. The response came faster than expected. By evening, her testimony was being quoted on national news. By midnight, it had been read into the congressional record. By morning, 3 more Silver Line-connected officials had been arrested. The dominoes were falling, but Sarah knew the fight wasn't over, because the people at the very top, the ones who'd ordered the Syria facility destroyed, who'd authorized Cross's death, who'd spent 7 years hunting survivors, those people were still hidden in the shadows, still protected by layers of bureaucracy and classification and plausible deniability, still dangerous. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Lieutenant Brennan? The voice was old, male, calm. You've caused quite a bit of trouble. Who is this? Someone who's been watching you for a very long time. Someone who's been very impressed by your resilience. Sarah's blood ran cold. What do you want? To offer you a choice. You can continue this crusade. Continue exposing operations you don't understand. Continue making enemies of people who will outlive you by decades. Or you can walk away. Take the victory you've earned. Let us clean up the mess quietly. The mess is children in cages. The mess is a necessary program that got sloppy. We're fixing it, replacing incompetent personnel, implementing better oversight. The program will continue, but it will be cleaner, safer, more ethical. You can't make human experimentation on children ethical, can't we? Your country has been doing it for decades. Radiation experiments in the 50s, MK Ultra in the 60s, enhanced interrogation in the 2000s. Every generation finds it shocking when the curtain is pulled back, and every generation eventually accepts it as necessary. Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. I will spend the rest of my life making sure that doesn't happen. The voice chuckled. Then you'll die sooner than you expect, Lieutenant. Just like Captain Rourke. Just like Senator Cross. Just like everyone else who thought they could stop something bigger than themselves. Who are you? I'm the person who decided you were worth more alive than dead. For now. Don't make me reconsider. The line went dead. Sarah sat in the darkness, staring at her phone. The voice had been calm, confident, absolutely certain of its power. And that certainty terrified her more than any threat, because it meant the fight wasn't ending, wasn't even close to ending. Silverline was just one program, one tentacle of something much larger, something that had survived decades of exposure and scandal and public outrage, something that would survive her too, if she wasn't careful. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, dawn was coming, the first light touching the trees. A new day. Somewhere in Washington, powerful people were already planning their next move, already calculating how to contain the damage, already deciding who would be sacrificed and who would be protected. And somewhere in that same city, a grand jury was preparing to hear testimony that would bring down some of those powerful people. Not all of them. Maybe not even most of them, but enough to prove that exposure was possible, that accountability was possible. That the quiet nurse from Riverside General had become someone who couldn't be erased anymore. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marsh. Congressional hearing scheduled. 2 weeks. They want all of us to testify. Public session. Cameras. The works. She typed back. I'll be there. Because 2 weeks from now, the entire country would be watching. And Sarah Brennan, the woman who'd been declared dead 7 years ago, who'd spent 3 years hiding as a hospital nurse, who'd fought her way out of a conspiracy designed to bury her forever, would finally have the chance to speak truth to power, in front of everyone, with nowhere left to hide. The 2 weeks before the congressional hearing felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to crumble. Sarah spent the time preparing her testimony with Rachel Vinson, going over every detail until her voice went hoarse. They practiced questions she might face, anticipated attacks on her credibility, rehearsed responses that would sound authentic instead of coached. They're going to try to paint you as unstable, Vinson warned during one of their sessions. 7 years in hiding, fake identity, history of trauma. They'll suggest you've invented a conspiracy to explain your own mental health struggles. Let them try. I'm serious, Sarah. You need to stay calm up there. Don't let them provoke you. Don't get emotional. The moment you lose control, they win. But Sarah knew that staying calm was exactly what had kept her invisible for so long. Maybe it was time to stop being calm. Maybe it was time to be angry. The night before the hearing, she couldn't sleep. She stood at the window of the secure hotel room the marshals had provided, watching traffic move through D.C. streets, thinking about all the people in this city who knew the truth and stayed silent because speaking up cost too much. Her phone buzzed, text from Morrison, the K-9 handler from the hospital. Saw the news. Ranger says hello. Good luck tomorrow. She smiled slightly. Morrison had been one of the first people to see past her disguise, even if he hadn't understood what he was seeing at the time. Another message came through. This one from an unknown number. They're going to destroy you tomorrow. Last chance to walk away. Sarah deleted it without responding. At 6 a.m., Vincent arrived with a suit for Sarah to wear. Navy blue. Professional. The kind of armor women wore when facing hostile audiences. You ready? Vincent asked. No. Good. If you were ready, I'd be worried. They arrived at the Capitol building 2 hours before the hearing. Security was intense. Metal detectors, bag searches, credential checks. Sarah moved through it all feeling disconnected, like she was watching herself from somewhere outside her body. The hearing room was enormous. Rows of seats for spectators. Cameras mounted on walls. A long table at the front where senators sat like judges presiding over a trial. Another table facing them where witnesses would testify. Sarah took her seat beside Vincent. Behind them, she could see Marsh, Lang, Torres, and Webb sitting in the gallery. Other faces, too. People she didn't know, but who'd shown up to watch justice happen. Or fail to happen. The chairman gavelled the hearing to order at 9 a.m. sharp. Senator Patricia Holder, Armed Services Committee, 63 years old with steel gray hair and a reputation for not suffering fools. This committee convenes today to investigate allegations regarding a covert program known as Silverline, Holder began, her voice carrying through the room. We will hear testimony from multiple witnesses, review classified documents, and determine what actions, if any, were taken that violated federal law and human rights standards. The first witness called wasn't Sarah. It was Daniel Grayson, the former Pentagon official who'd been arrested the week before. Grayson looked diminished sitting at the witness table. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. He took the oath with a shaking hand. Senator Holder leaned forward. Mr. Grayson, you served as Deputy Director of Defense Research from 2015 to 2023. During that time, were you aware of a program called Silverline? I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Were you involved in authorizing funding for facilities that conducted experiments on children? I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. Did you have knowledge of Operation Night Falcon and the subsequent cover-up? I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. Holder's expression hardened. Mr. Grayson, you've been granted limited immunity in exchange for your testimony here today. If you refuse to answer, that immunity is void and you will face the full extent of federal prosecution. Do you understand? Grayson's lawyer whispered something in his ear. Grayson nodded slowly. Yes, Senator, I understand. Then let me ask again. Were you aware of Silverline? Grayson swallowed hard. Yes. The room erupted. Spectators gasped. Reporters started typing frantically. Holder gavelled for order. And did Silverline involve human experimentation? Yes. On children? Yes. With congressional oversight? Grayson hesitated. His lawyer whispered again. Grayson closed his eyes. No. The program was funded through black budget allocations that bypassed normal oversight procedures. Who authorized those allocations? Senator Raymond Cross and others. Name them. Grayson named 6 people. 3 current senators, 2 defense contractors, 1 White House aide. The room exploded again. Cameras flashed. Voices rose. Holder had to gavel 3 times to restore order. Sarah watched it happen and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a cold awareness that this was only the beginning, that the names Grayson was giving up were the visible ones, the expendable ones, while the real architects stayed hidden. After 2 hours of testimony, Grayson was dismissed. Holder called for a short recess before the next witness. Vincent turned to Sarah. "That was good. That was really good. Grayson just confirmed everything in your testimony. The committee has to take this seriously now. They'll still try to discredit me. Of course they will. But now it's harder." The hearing resumed at noon. Holder looked directly at Sarah. "The committee calls Lieutenant Sarah Brennan." Sarah stood and walked to the witness table. The room felt enormous. All those eyes watching, all those cameras recording, millions of people watching on television, waiting to judge her. She took the oath. "Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." Holder waited a moment, letting the weight settle. Then she spoke. "Lieutenant Brennan, you served in the Marine Corps from 2013 to 2017. Is that correct?" "Yes, Senator." "And during that time you were attached to a classified special operations unit?" "Yes." "Tell us about Operation Night Falcon." Sarah took a breath. Then she began. She told them everything: the mission parameters, the facility they'd discovered, the children in cages, the experiments being conducted, Captain Rourke's attempt to report it through official channels, the airstrike that killed everyone except the few who managed to escape. She spoke for 40 minutes without interruption. Her voice stayed steady. She didn't cry, didn't break down, just laid out the facts like she was briefing a superior officer. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Senator Marcus Webb, no relation to her teammate, leaned forward. He was younger than Holder, mid-40s, with the polished look of someone who'd never spent a day in combat. "Lieutenant Brennan, you claim you've been in hiding for 7 years, living under a false identity, working as a nurse despite having no formal nursing degree. I have medical training from the military. I was qualified for the position. But you lied on your application, used a fake name, fake credentials. I did what I had to do to stay alive. Or you did what you had to do to avoid facing consequences for your actions." Vincent stood immediately. "Senator, that's inappropriate. My client is a whistleblower, not a criminal. Your client assaulted a federal agent, stole classified documents, evaded law enforcement. Those are crimes, counselor." Sarah felt her anger rising but kept her voice level. "I defended myself against people trying to kill me. I took evidence of crimes being committed, and I evaded assassins, not law enforcement." "That's your version of events. It's the truth." "Is it? Or is it the delusion of someone suffering from undiagnosed PTSD? Someone who created an elaborate conspiracy theory to explain her own mental health crisis?" The room erupted again. Vincent was on her feet, shouting objections. Holder was gaveling for order. Sarah just sat there, staring at Senator Webb, understanding exactly what he was doing. He was protecting someone who'd told him to attack her credibility, someone who was watching this hearing and coordinating the defense in real time. When order was restored, Sarah leaned toward the microphone. "Senator Webb, do you have children?" He blinked, thrown by the question. "I don't see how that's relevant." "Do you?" "Yes, 2 daughters." "How old?" 7 and 9. Sarah nodded slowly. "The children I saw in that facility were between 6 and 12 years old. They were malnourished, sleep-deprived, covered in needle marks from experimental drugs. One of them died while I was trying to treat him. He was 8 years old. His name was Omar." Her voice cracked slightly on the name. She didn't try to hide it. "I watched him die because the people running that facility cared more about their research than his life. And when my commanding officer tried to stop it, they killed him too. Killed everyone who might expose what they were doing." She leaned closer to the microphone. "So you can question my mental health all you want, Senator. You can call me delusional, unstable, whatever helps you sleep at night. But those children were real. Their suffering was real. And the people responsible are still out there, protected by men like you who'd rather attack the messenger than face the message." The room went completely silent. Webb's face was red. "I'm not protecting anyone." "Then prove it. Support a full investigation. Demand access to all classified files related to Silverline. Call every person involved to testify under oath. Show the country that you care more about justice than politics. Webb didn't respond. Holder's expression was unreadable. Lieutenant Brennan, you mentioned that Captain Rourke attempted to report the facility through official channels. Do you have evidence of that? Dr. Evelyn Harper has evidence. She documented everything, including Rourke's reports and the orders to destroy the facility. Dr. Harper will testify later today, but I want to ask you something else. In your testimony, you named several current government officials as being connected to Silverline. That's a serious accusation. Can you substantiate it? Yes, Senator. The financial records show direct payments from shell corporations to campaign funds, personal accounts, and family members. The paper trail is clear. And you obtained these records how? From Director Voss's laptop, the one I took when she tried to have me sedated and disappeared. Holder paused. So you stole classified information. I took evidence of ongoing crimes. There's a legal difference, is there? Because from where I'm sitting, the legal system failed to protect those children, failed to stop the people exploiting them, failed to hold anyone accountable until we forced their hand. She looked directly at Holder. We trusted the system, Senator. We followed protocol. We reported what we found through official channels. And the system responded by killing us and burying the evidence. So forgive me if I don't have much faith in legal procedures anymore. Holder studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I understand your frustration, Lieutenant. And for what it's worth, I believe you. The evidence you've provided is compelling. The testimony is consistent. And frankly, no one would put themselves through what you've been through for a delusion. She looked at the other senators on the committee. This committee will recommend immediate criminal investigations into every individual named in Lieutenant Brennan's testimony. We will demand full declassification of all Silverline-related documents, and we will ensure that the children affected by this program receive comprehensive care and support. It wasn't everything, but it was something. The hearing continued for 3 more hours. Dr. Harper testified, her voice shaking but her facts unshakable. Marsh, Torres, Lang, and Webb each gave their accounts. More documents were entered into the record. More names were named. By the time the hearing adjourned, 6 more officials had been implicated. 3 had already resigned. 2 were being investigated by federal prosecutors. The dominoes were falling faster now. Sarah walked out of the Capitol building into late afternoon sunshine. Reporters swarmed immediately, shouting questions, pointing cameras, demanding statements. Vincent handled them with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Brennan has testified fully and completely before Congress. She has no further comment at this time. They pushed through the crowd to a waiting car. Sarah climbed in, exhausted, her hands still shaking from adrenaline. Marsh was already inside. You did good up there. I told the truth. That's all. That's everything. They drove back to the safe house in silence. Inside, Lang had the news coverage playing on every screen. Analysts were already dissecting the hearing, debating implications, arguing about what would happen next. Sarah turned away from the screens and walked outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. She stood on the porch, breathing cold air, trying to process everything that had happened. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then she did. Lieutenant Brennan, the same old voice from 2 weeks ago. Calm, confident. Congratulations. You got your hearing, your moment in the spotlight. How does it feel? Like the beginning, not the end. Smart. Because it is the beginning. The investigation will take years. The trials will drag on forever. Most of the people you named will never see the inside of a prison cell. They'll retire quietly, take positions in the private sector, live comfortable lives while you spend yours looking over your shoulder. Maybe one investigation leads to another. One trial exposes another network. One conviction encourages another whistleblower to come forward. Maybe we start a chain reaction you can't stop. The voice chuckled. Or maybe you just made yourself a permanent target. Do you really think you can survive what comes next? I survived the last 7 years. I'll survive the next 7 too. Will you? People like you don't usually last. Too much integrity, too much conviction. The world breaks people like you. Sarah looked out at the sunset. The world already broke me. I'm just the pieces that wouldn't stay down. She hung up. Her hands were still shaking, but not from fear, from something else, something that felt almost like hope. The next morning, Sarah woke to news that 3 more Silver Line-connected officials had been arrested. Federal raids were happening across 4 states. Documents were being seized. Witnesses were being interviewed. The investigation was real. By the end of the week, Senator Webb had resigned. 2 defense contractors had filed for bankruptcy, trying to distance themselves from the scandal. The Pentagon had announced a comprehensive review of all black budget programs. The children from the facilities were being placed in specialized care facilities designed for trauma survivors. Psychologists, therapists, people trained to help them process what they'd been through. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was more than they'd had a month ago. Sarah received a call from Morrison. "I saw your testimony. Ranger and I wanted you to know we think you're pretty incredible." "I'm just someone who wouldn't shut up. That's what makes you incredible. Most people would have stayed quiet. You didn't." After he hung up, Sarah sat for a long time thinking about what came next. She couldn't go back to nursing, couldn't pretend to be invisible anymore. But she also couldn't spend the rest of her life just testifying and reliving trauma. She needed something forward-looking, something that turned the anger and pain into something constructive. She called Vincent. "I want to start an organization, something that helps whistleblowers like us, people who expose corruption and then get abandoned by the system, legal support, financial assistance, protection." "That's ambitious." "I've got nothing but time." "And you think you can fund something like that?" "I've already got 5 people willing to help run it. And I bet there are a lot of veterans out there who donate to support people trying to do the right thing." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "You know what? I think you're right. Let me make some calls." 3 months later, the organization was official. They called it Falcon Watch, named after the operation that had started everything. The mission was simple: support whistleblowers, fund investigations into government misconduct, and provide legal resources to people trying to expose corruption. They worked out of a small office in Baltimore. Sarah ran operations. Marsh handled security. Lang managed communications. Torres and Webb coordinated outreach to veteran communities. Within 6 months, they'd helped 12 whistleblowers come forward with information about military fraud, corporate malfeasance, and government abuse. 3 investigations had been launched. 1 criminal prosecution had already resulted in convictions. It wasn't Silver Line-level impact, but it was something. A year after the congressional hearing, Sarah received a letter. The return address was unfamiliar. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single page, handwritten in child scrawl. "Dear Miss Sarah, they told me you're the one who saved us. I don't remember you. I don't remember a lot of things. The doctors say that's normal when bad things happen. But I wanted to say thank you. Because of you, I have a family now. Real parents who don't hurt me. A room with toys and books. A dog named Charlie. I'm learning to be a regular kid. It's hard, but I'm trying. Thank you for not giving up on us. Michael." Sarah read the letter 3 times, then she put it in a frame on her desk where she could see it every day. 2 years after the hearing, the last major trial concluded. 4 former Pentagon officials were convicted. 2 received prison sentences. The other 2 were fined and barred from government service. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. But it was more than nothing. Senator Holder retired from Congress and joined Falcon Watch's advisory board. Dr. Harper, after completing her testimony and witness protection obligations, started working as a medical consultant helping trauma survivors. The children, 43 survivors total, were scattered across the country in foster homes, adoptive families, and specialized care facilities. Some were thriving, some were struggling. All of them were free. On the 3rd anniversary of the Riverside General attack, Sarah returned to Carson Falls. The hospital looked exactly the same. Same parking lot, same emergency entrance, same building where she'd spent 3 years trying to be invisible. She walked inside. The ER was busy. Nurses rushing between bays, doctors shouting orders. The familiar chaos of emergency medicine. Dr. Reeves was still there, older and grayer, but still treating patients. He looked up when Sarah approached. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Reeves extended his hand. "Lieutenant Brennan, I owe you an apology." "You don't." "I do. I treated you like you were incompetent, like you didn't matter. I was wrong." Sarah shook his hand. "You were just doing your job." I was being an arrogant ass. There's a difference. She smiled slightly. Fair enough. Linda Cho appeared from one of the trauma bays, saw Sarah, and stopped dead. Sarah? Oh my God. We heard you were testifying in Washington, but we didn't think you'd come back here. I needed to see it again, needed to remember what it felt like before everything changed. Linda hugged her tightly. You saved us that night. You know that, right? If you hadn't been here when those men came, we'd all be dead. I just did what I was trained to do. You did what nobody else could do. Don't minimize that. Other nurses were gathering now. People Sarah had worked beside for 3 years. People who'd barely acknowledged her existence back then. They all wanted to talk to her, wanted to shake her hand, wanted to thank her. Sarah stayed for an hour, answering questions, sharing stories, feeling strange about being visible after so long being invisible. Before she left, Morrison found her. Ranger at his side, tail wagging. Heard you were in town, Morrison said. Couldn't stay away. We still use that K9 recognition story in training, the dog that found the ghost. Sarah knelt and scratched Ranger's ears. The dog leaned into her touch, remembering. He's a good dog. He's a great dog. And you're a hell of a person, Lieutenant. Morrison handed her something, a challenge coin, military tradition. For what it's worth, everyone here respects what you did. Not just that night, but after. The whole country saw you stand up there and tell the truth. That takes guts. Sarah closed her hand around the coin. Thank you. She left the hospital and walked through Carson Falls. The town looked peaceful in the afternoon light. People going about their lives, kids on bicycles, couples walking dogs. Normal. She'd spent 7 years desperate for normal. And now that she'd found it again, she realized normal wasn't what she wanted anymore. She wanted purpose, wanted to keep fighting, wanted to make sure what happened to her and to those children never happened to anyone else. That wasn't normal. That was something harder. Something that would cost her peace and comfort and probably years of her life. But it was worth it. Because somewhere out there, another whistleblower was deciding whether to speak up or stay silent. Another child was trapped in a system that valued profits over people. Another person was being erased by powerful forces that thought they were untouchable. And Sarah Brennan, the quiet nurse who'd spent 3 years being invisible, who'd survived assassination attempts and federal manhunts and congressional interrogations, was going to make sure those people had someone fighting for them. She drove back to Baltimore as the sun set. The office would be closed by the time she arrived, but she still had work to do. Cases to review, strategies to plan, whistleblowers to support. The fight wasn't over. Probably wouldn't be over in her lifetime, but at least now she was fighting. She thought about the voice on the phone, the old man who'd told her the world breaks people like her. Maybe he was right. Maybe the world did break people who refused to stay quiet. People who valued truth over comfort. People who believed accountability mattered more than convenience. But broken wasn't the same as defeated. She'd been broken in Syria. Broken by 7 years of hiding. Broken by watching children die and colleagues get erased. And yet here she was. Still standing, still fighting, still refusing to disappear. The pieces that wouldn't stay down. That's what she'd told him. And that's what she'd become. Sarah pulled into the parking lot of the Falcon Watch office. The building was dark, except for one light still burning in the corner office where Marsh was probably working late. She sat in the car for a moment, looking at that light. For 7 years, she'd lived in darkness. Hiding, running, pretending. But darkness didn't last forever. Eventually, someone lights a candle. Then someone else lights another, and another, until the darkness isn't quite so dark anymore. Sarah got out of the car and walked toward that light. She had work to do, people to help, systems to challenge. The woman they'd called invisible had become impossible to ignore. The nurse they'd dismissed had exposed a military conspiracy. The survivor they'd declared dead had helped bring down the people who tried to erase her. And now, finally, she wasn't running anymore. She was home,